sitting on the west bank of Demerara identify as the Wales Sugar Estate, home to thousands of Guyanese, 1,700 of them who are employed directly in the sugar industry and at Wales. The news of the estate's closure and plans to diversify came as a shock to many harvesters, farmers, their families, and hundreds of service providers. In October, it was Gaisuco's Chief Executive Officer, Harold Hanuman, who explained the impact of workers' wages and salaries on their communities.
Over the decades, Gaisuco has been one of the main contributors, generators of cash flow in the communities through its wages, its salaries, its support of businesses, directly and indirectly.
In recent times, sugar production at Wales Sugar Estate have not been up to par. Workers boasts that the estate saw its best production in the 1980s and the 1990s, when it produced more than 30,000 tons of sugar. The decline in sugar production has not been limited to Wales. The industry has been on the receiving end of several blows over the decades, among them the lack of investment, abolition of the European Union sugar production quotas, decline in sugar prices, weather and labour challenges. Wales Estate, nonetheless, contributed significantly to the annual total sugar production over the years.
Take the period 2002, 2003, 2004, the average production of Wales was 32,000 tons of sugar. And the production around now, both crops is around 18,000 tons. Farmers produce about 50% of the cane. And so the estate itself just produced the other 50%. So you have all the possibilities, you have the land. You don't have a shortage of workers at Wales.
Koma Chand is president of the Guyana Agriculture and General Workers Union. To the 1,700 workers at Wales, these figures are more than just numbers. It's their livelihood. Dio Paul worked at Wales since 1992. He's a cane harvester. At 50 years of age, he ponders his next move.
When the estate closed, you got no plans, you're going to go and see for jobs or meals.
Dio Paul's story is similar to many of his co-workers who spend many days toiling in the fields during harvesting.
This area would totally close down. People would have to think about leaving.
The news of the ending of sugar cultivation at Wales was unexpected, but some of the workers had opted for severance as the Sugar Corporation announced an option to move workers to the Ivelet estate located on the west coast of Demerara. When we met the workers, more than 90 of their colleagues had opted to take severance packages. Some of the workers were pondering this option.
If they decide to close on the estate, we want we severance pay. If they're still closing it, we need we severance pay because we don't want to go to estate. I employ Wales estate and go part of my blood, and I don't want to go to the estate. Once we estate abandoned, we entitled to pay off. If they want to employ we back after we get pay off and take we back for my block, we don't get a problem.
For many others, sugar is a legacy, a lifelong family tradition, and their only option at earning a livelihood.
Wales estate, since I grew up, my mother used to work in the estate. My father used to work in the estate in the 60s.
My father worked in the Wales estate. My grandfather, myself, and now this is the only thing we know about sugar.
The dependents of sugar are many, and for Wales they number in the thousands, from children in school, pensioners, shopkeepers, market vendors, doctors and other professionals.
Suddenly, if you wake up one morning and decide to close it. Now, when you close the estate, not only those who are directly working there will be affected. There are other dependents, the business people, the taxi, the vendors, and what have you, the farmers inclusive.
1,700 workers, if you multiply by 3 children at home, I just put a use and figure, it could be 5,100 people will be affected. And the community-wise, about 40,000 got affected. What business, who business, what cannot do business because of the closure.
Fridays are Wales' market busiest days. It is the day sugar workers line outside the Sugar Corporation's office for their wages. Those wages would quickly make their way into keeping the community alive, passing from the hands of housewives to market vendors. Vendors come from all over the country to ply their trade at Wales. They sell from vegetables and groceries to clothing and electronics. Terence Morrison and his wife ply their trade at the market. They've been doing so for 2 decades. Chatur Prasad and Selbert Alexander both work in the sugar industry. They have retired, and to complement their pension, they occupy 2 stalls in the market.
But this market is by 10 like this. You don't get free for work. What do you get?
Maybe because there will be a bookstore, right? And we can't sell anymore.
For many of the vendors, they are prepared to close shop if Wales is no more.
So if this estate closed, everything closed down. We don't know what we could do for a living, what we could eat. More better yet, we could collapse.
You see, the market is like nothing million now. Long time the market is busy. And without the market, we don't know what's going to happen. Everybody going to start the shop.
The Brahman family is an example of a typical Wales family who are completely dependent on the estate. 4 men in this family work in the sugar industry, and 14 of their family members depend on their weekly wages.
I'm here 50 years. And the estate closed by me home there.
Abdul Munfar Rahman estimates that each family spends more than $20,000, an equivalent of $100 a week, to keep their family going. Half of that money, he explained, goes towards buying food. His brother, Abdul Zahir Hamid, works at the Wales Sugar Factory. Their mother, a pensioner, lives with the family.
He got loan for pay. And this one got so expensive. So you hard to do.
The Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union have been monitoring the situation closely. The union represents a large percentage of sugar workers and is against the move to close the estate. The union was the first organization to rally the workers and protested the announcement. Member of Parliament Komal Chand is president of the Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union. When we met with Mr. Chand, he lamented the lack of a study that examines the impact of the closure and the transition of the estate.
It impacts heavily on the hundreds of sugar workers, 1,700 managerial and non-managerial workers, 849 farmers, many of whom have small holdings, and it would mean that the workers virtually have no alternative jobs. Coming from the elections campaign, when the sugar workers and the nation was assured that sugar is too big to fail by all the politicians from both sides of the divide, meaning that sugar will be protected, the importance of sugar, because sugar is so important to the economy. One cannot look at not only the financial factor, but the economic and social factor. Many governments subsidize the sugar industry, the United States of America, Brazil, Thailand, India, and many small countries. Those agricultural enterprises that mean so much to the people and the economy, they subsidize.
Mr. Chand estimates that some $2 billion are paid to sugar workers annually. The removal of that money could be detrimental to all communities dependent on the industry.
It will be very devastating when this whole thing is felt, the whole closure is felt.
In January, the Guyana Sugar Corporation, in its release, said that it would be too costly to refurbish and maintain the Wales factory in a state. Guyana also announced that it would explore the feasibility of alternative ventures utilizing lands at Wales.
We are about to embark on a pilot project to cultivate roughly 480 acres of seed paddy.
Guyana's CEO, Harold Hanuman, in October, when he spoke at a University of Guyana forum held under the title Guyana Transitioning into a Resilient Business. Among the other plans are aquaculture and citrus farming.
We should be receiving the feasibility study anytime this month. The preliminary indications are that the aquaculture is feasible, but let's wait until we get the study. In addition to this, the Minister of Agriculture has established a task force, and this task force was charged with looking at the feasibility of a variety of diversified activities.
There is very little public information on these plans, and many of the sugar workers we spoke with are skeptical about them.
We've been hearing about planting rice and citrus and so many things, and people are getting frustrated, right? Many families, their children, and people who depend on them, they're going to suffer a lot.
They told us that they would diversify from the 1st of October. Subsequently, I see a little land preparation have been done.
They said by October, the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Holder, is on record to have said by October one of the ventures will be in place. There is nothing of this sort. They are now tilling some land which they hope to grow rice, and they said it will be on an experimental basis.
GAU's president, Mr. Chand, explained that he believes that prime sugarcane lands would be used for these projects. He fears too that it will not create the needed volume of employment.
They will employ a small number of people. It's not labor intensive. Now, since independence, we have remained very dependent on sugar, on rice, and other businesses. We have not done anything to move away from some of these crops like sugar.
A commission of inquiry into the state of the industry was launched in 2016, and in its final report did not recommend the closure of any of the sugar estates. The announcement to close Wales and plans to diversify its lands had stalwarts of the industry like Mr. Chand questioning the corporation's reasoning or lack thereof.
Sugar is going through a bad patch at this period of time. There is no doubt about that. It had happened in all the years of the history of sugar. The Commission of Inquiry that was set up by the government made a number of recommendations.
Mr. Chan told us that he felt that the corporation didn't act on the recommendations made by the Commission of Inquiry.
Wales estate closure is one where they flout, ignore, disregard the Commission of Inquiry report. The Commission of Inquiry said there should be no closure. There should be a study with respect to the West Demerara estate, that is Iflot and Wales.
The union leader said that his organization stands behind plans to diversify the industry, but is adamant that workers must not pay the ultimate price of change.
We import in the Caribbean over 200,000 tons of refined sugar, and we have a market there for that quantity. We talk about we could do the study, we could put up a proposal, and we will find funding between private and government to have the refinery. So you have the refinery, another distillery, we have one in Guyana, we have surplus molasses, we could have that. So we're talking about the diversification of sugar.
Meanwhile, Wales workers feel that they have not been given a chance to defend their world of work. Some of the workers had an appeal.
If you buy a house and the house leaking and you go inside where you go to the house, you're not going to repair it. You cannot live in the house and the thing. So the government take over the estate with the opposition abandon them. He's supposed to repair it and make certain that you get work with people.
Sometimes sugar take low, sometimes it go up, sugar be up and down. But that still don't give you the right to say, well, look, I will close. We got to invest and see how invest into the industry that it could be able to cope with the situation.
However, Gaisuco's Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Hanuman, has painted a grim picture of the sugar industry. A sharp feature of that picture is Gaisuco's debt.
The 50 billion represents debt, real debt, that has to be paid and should be paid, should be serviced. The 30 million represents future debt in relation to the pensions of our employees. So those materialize as and when our employees retire. So if you want to say our real debt now, solid debt is approximately 50 billion, and there is approximately $30 billion in debt associated with future pensions. We're at maximum. We have for many years now been experiencing the greatest difficulty paying our creditors, paying our tax bills, paying our rates and taxes. If you ask most of the local authorities along the coast where you have Gaisugo Sugar Estates, they will tell you that for the longest while Gaisugo has not been paying its rates and taxes. If you check with the GRA, they will tell you for the longest while Gaisugo owes property taxes and other taxes for many, many years.
Mr. Hanneman explained that Gaisugo owes the Guyana Revenue Authority, the Commission of Lands and Survey for lease rentals, while it still has to maintain drainage and irrigation structures in many communities, and Gaisugo-run medical clinics, among other facilities. Gaisugo has been unable to do all of this on its own, and the government's subsidy to the industry has not gone unnoticed. The government subsidized the Sugar Corporation to the tune of $12 billion in 2015, and as of October 2016, the corporation benefited from $11 billion. Mr. Hanneman estimated that Gaisugo would need as much as $20 billion in subsidy in 2018. Back at Wales, while workers try to ascertain the next path, the management of the industry has not escaped their attention.
We got to look from starting from the head, from management area. What caused the estate to reach in this state? We agree that yes, government used some of the money for building next industry, but negligence takes place from top way down to the bottom.
There is still a wish that sugar returns to its rightful place.
In the 70s,